Ah, the tangled webs we weave.
What's going on, y'all? It's Dawhveed, back with another amazing flak build for Mayhem 4 that can solo all current content available. Yes, including the heist and the Malawan takedown. I call it my Violet Fireworks flak build because when you shoot enemies, they eject numerous streams of purple lights that look kinda like fireworks. It's pretty glorious. As with all of my other build videos, I will be covering the must-have skills and gear, and going over other options as well as the most optimal setups. So, as normal, we'll first start off with the skill tree with 5 points into Interplanetary Stalker because this skill is amazing for just dealing raw damage. Next, I like to max out Leave No Trace because this is a crit build and this skill helps us avoid spending time on reloading to dish out DPS as efficiently as possible. If you're using a gun that pumps out ammo quicker than you can return it, such as most launchers or other shotguns, consider using Second Intentions instead because Leave No Trace won't really do anything for you without you waiting out the Leave No Trace cooldown. On line 2, I max out Hunter's Eye because these bonuses are overall very helpful for our DPS, and running the Bounty Hunter class mod makes this skill incredibly efficient for 5 points, giving you all 3 of these bonuses. Next, we can also max out head count because, as I'll explain later in the video when we get to the action skill, you want your action skill to be up almost all the time for means of survival and maximum DPS. On line 3, I max out Two Fang because extra projectiles simply just mean extra damage. Next, we can max out the Most Dangerous Game because it gives us increased crit damage and gun damage for a rather long period of time, both stats that are really great for our build. Now onto my favorite skill, Galactic Shadow. It gives us a whopping 15% crit damage for a single point and gives us the fantastic ability to be less likely to be targeted by enemies. This skill is absolutely perfect for a majority of solo builds for Flak for high Mayhem levels like Mayhem 4, and it only costs a single point. I believe this is probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest skill in the game for solo content. Finally, we can put a point into our Hunter Capstone for Megavore, which ties the whole tree together, increasing our chances to return ammo and reduce our action skill cooldown time, while also improving our DPS exponentially. Now that we have our DPS skills laid out, we can go on over to the Master Tree for our survival skills. First, I put 3 points into Persistence Hunter because 3 points for a crazy long duration extension on our action skill is really worth it. It gives us gun damage on top of all of that. The next 2 points can go pretty much wherever. I just put one into each because I'm a tad OCD. And on line 2, I put a single point into He Bites first because this skill is important to proc our next couple skills. It first procs our 1 point into Frenzy, which means that we get increased damage from enemies attacking our pet, and with the Galactic Stalker, they're probably going to be attacking our pet instead of us. More importantly though, it triggers our 5 points into Who Rescued Who, meaning that we get 2% of our max health restored per second for a short duration whenever a pet takes damage when he bites. Also, this skill in return helps keep our pet alive by translating 5% of the damage dealt by me into HP for my pet. So basically we just sustain each other, and I think that that's really wholesome. It makes me proud to be a Flak player. Okay, so on the next line, I max out Hive Mind because it's essentially a 15% damage reduction buff because it sends that damage over to our pet instead, which just ends up getting healed back as soon as I do damage from Who Rescued Who. Then I max out Barbaric Yop because this gives our pet bonus an insane multiplier, which I'll go over in just a little bit. I like to split the last 2 points by putting 1 into Pack Tactics for the max HP and damage buff for my pet and myself, which by the way are probably the most 2 important stats for any build really, and then the final point into Shared Spirit to further reduce the damage I take when I get low HP. For my action skill, you probably already guessed it or saw it, but this is a fadeaway build, and yes, I know I have 0 points in the Stalker tree, so I can't even use any of the augments. This is honestly okay because the base skill is already insanely useful with multiple combinations of our skills. With Persistence Hunter, it helps give us more time to stealth to reposition ourselves to gain some HP back. With Leave No Trace, it gives us our ammo back from shooting, and with Head Count, we can really get our action skill back almost instantly if you shoot your last fadeaway shot correctly into an enemy's critical hit spot. Not to mention all of the crit damage skills we have to pair with the guaranteed fadeaway crits. For my pet, I actually prefer the Spider Ant Countess because it gives 2 really important stats for soloing Mayhem 4 content, being HP regen and damage reduction. The base damage reduction is only 5%, but with the maxed out Barbaric Yop, it goes all the way up to 15%, which is honestly incredible because it stacks with our other damage reduction skills. If you find yourself not really getting targeted, like when you're with friends or something, I'd probably instead go for the Great Horn Skag, because with our barbaric yacht points, you get 15% increase to all damage dealt, and on top of that, a 30% increase to your gun damage. Now onto the best part in my opinion, which is the gear. Starting with the main weapon that I use, which believe it or not is only a purple gun, and that's the Dastardly Scattergun by Jacobs. This gun, first off, is incredible because similar to almost all the Jacobs guns, it ricochets bullets that you crit the enemies with, so if all 14 of the pellets go into an enemy's crit spot, that means that 14 more bullets then seek out other enemies to deal extra damage, which is essentially what creates the fireworks effect when I'm in fadeaway. It comes with a pretty decently sized magazine and only shoots 1 out of 8 every time you pull the trigger, which is actually extremely important because it means that we don't ever really have to reload due to leave no trace. The zoom on it is a nice quality of life because it helps snipe enemies further away precisely, but the anointment is what really ties the build together and gives it its identity. It reads, on action skill end, the next 2 magazines will have 50% bonus shock damage. If you're curious on how exactly this effect works, I go into a bit greater detail on this in my solo Mayhem 4 takedown pinball flak build, so go check that out if you'd like to know more about it. I'll leave a link in the top right corner of your screen and also in the description. Basically, it just gives us that bonus shock damage from the anointment through added pellets to the gun, and this anoint stacks with other similar ones that are different elements. For example, on my transformer shield for the build, I have a corrosive version, and for my grenade, I have an incendiary one to maximize the amount of pellets that I get. This is what gives the fireworks that crazy cool look that fills up my entire screen at sometimes. I use the transformer as my shield of choice because it's pretty much the best all-around shield currently, and with a large shield capacity and an irreplaceable effect that translates all incoming shock damage into restoration for my shield, making you a nightmare to shock enemies. My grenade for the build is only really used for the anointment actually. I rarely ever find myself needing to toss a grenade with this build because I'm lighting off fireworks as often as I can. If you're wondering why I chose the elements that I did, the shock on my gun is for shields, the corrosive on my shield is for armor, and the incendiary on my grenade is for flesh. It's pretty simple. If you're looking for something spicy and unique, try out the cryo and the radiation versions. The cryo one is super useful for freezing the mobs, and the radiation one is particularly useful in mobbing for the AoE explosion on kill. For my class mod of choice, I usually run one for mobbing and a different one for bossing. For mobbing, I currently am using a Deadeye because the ability is kind of decent, but the stats are really the main reason that I use it. This one I have comes with shotgun damage, shield capacity, and Jacob's weapon crit damage, all 3 very useful things. Although with a new heist DLC, I picked up this stack bot with Jacob's weapon damage and shotgun damage, I might start using this one because the stack bot ability would be perfect with fadeaway. Also, the point that it gives me in pack tactics is incredible. For bossing, I pretty much always use this bounty hunter mod because it comes with Jacob's crit damage and Jacob's weapon damage, but more importantly, it has the ability that makes bosses count as humans, robots, and beasts for my hunter skills, basically increasing my DPS to them by a buttload. Finally, for my relic, it varies really depending on what content I'm doing. On Mayhem 4 playthrough of the Moxie's Heist of the Handsome Jackpot that I just did, I used a loaded dice pretty much solely for the loot drops, but for my Mayhem 4 takedown run, I used a Snowdrift Victory Rush for the action skill cooldown and the magazine size mainly. Artifacts that you generally want to look for are Snowdrifts for the mobility and auto idols or victory rushes for the healing and the buffs respectively. For the stats, something like this would be perfect if it matched up with your anointments on your gear, or something like with movement speed or magazine size and action cooldown could also work. So something new that I've been doing with my builds is explaining the general basics of the gameplay and how you can and should be running the build. For mobbing, I just like to use my fadeaway to get into a good position and just light them up. In this clip, for example, I use my action skill to get out of harm's way, and
anyway, I started blasting. Bang! Wow.
God, I love that clip. Basically, you just want to make the most out of your fadeaway both offensively and defensively. Persistence Hunter gives you a pretty large amount of time to be in fadeaway and get into a good position. Always make sure you aim for the crits with this build. always. I can't stress that enough because it's what creates the fireworks effect, and it's how you dish out the most DPS. For bossing, you pretty much just want to hide away and fire off shots during fadeaway pretty much only, and make sure that you're in a safe spot. It sounds incredibly tedious, I know, but after some practice, you'll find out how untouchable you really can be and how incredibly powerful the build is. That, my friends, is going to be it for my Violet Fireworks Flak build for Mayhem 4 content like the Maliwan Takedown and the Moxie's Heist of the Handsome Jackpot. If you liked the video, please make sure to tediore check that like button because this took a very large amount of time to test it out and perfect the hit and run strategy. Also, don't forget to leave me a comment with your questions or thoughts or whatever because I reply to every single comment across all of my videos. If you don't want to miss out on future content from me, go ahead and face slam that subscribe button and the notification bell, and I'll check you all in the next video. See ya!
Those are advanced mechs, but we're after something bigger. Keep going.